Welcome to Tell the Damn Story, the show that explores the many ways to navigate the successes and failures that aspiring and struggling writers face to make your journey that much easier.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Tell the Damn Story. We are getting closer and closer to 400 episodes. And Alex, I wouldn't spend 400 episodes with anyone else but you. I mean, you know,
maybe glorious, yes.
Well, yes, that's bliss. This is more parole. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, thank you so much. I feel better. Yes.
And ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know, Alex Simmons is the creator, the writer of so many things, creator of Blackjack. And he has written everyone from Batman to Scooby-Doo to Archie and everyone in between. I tend to do more independent stuff. I have been traditionally published. Between the two of us, we can kind of approach it from two different angles to help you with as much information as we can provide to make your writing journey easier. And to help us do that, we bring in special guests. And today we have a great, exciting special guest. I actually have only known Charles for maybe about a year, right, Charles?
Right, yeah.
Charles Barouch. Did I say that right, Charles?
Yes.
There you go. See?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. He's going to blow it for the rest of the episode. But right now, he's got it.
But Charles has written Westerns. He's written horror. He's written sci-fi. He's written crime. And one of the things that I really appreciate about you, Charles, and one of the things I want to share with everyone today is that your stories, organic, great, easy to read, flow really well, but there's an authenticity, no matter which world you're in. That's something that I think a lot of emerging writers, which we attract a good number of those on the show, that can keep your head scratching. How do I do that? So we're going to do as best we can to see what you can teach us today.
Going to probe your brain, Charles, is pretty much what we're saying here.
About how you do what you do. If you want to jump in, if you have any questions before we start, that's fine. But if you want to jump in, we're going to ask you for a little bit of a bio. You know, we did a little look. You know, I know Goodreads says you have about 400. Was it 400 stories on Goodreads? Is that right?
No.
Let's do this.
A little bit
Charles,
shorter list than that, but yeah.
Charles, why don't you say hello and tell us about yourself?
I'll say hello and tell you about myself. Yes.
Brilliant.
Wonderful idea. So basically, I've been making up stories since I could speak. And I very early on figured out that it's not so much I like to talk, it's I like to be listened to. And so I very early on figured out I owe the listener something. I owe the reader something. I owe whatever medium I'm going to give them that story in. It's my obligation to not waste their time and to give them something they want.
Yes.
And so that's one of the central tenets of everything that I do. The other big tenet is I treat this all like I'm a cultural anthropologist. In other words, I look for stuff I don't fully understand, and I say, how can I figure it out by getting behind the eyes of the right character and share whatever I learn with whoever's going to read it?
Excellent.
Lots of authors will tell you, well, every character is really me. And for me, I try to keep me out of the story as much as I can. I mean, there are events and experiences and things like that come in because I have to have some point of reference. But I'm always trying to write someone who's not me because I'm always trying to see through somebody else's eyes. I'm always trying to widen perspective. And so I will very happily take the compliment you gave me in the intro, but it's because the characters are the reason for the story. I don't like characters who are plot stupid. I don't like characters who, if they figured this out, the book would be over. Well, then the book should be over and it's a short story. And that's one of the things that I've worked with a lot is the idea that the characters, if they're smart enough to figure it out, then they should figure it out. You look like you're about to ask me something there, Chris.
Well, I want to do a correction. Goodreads says that you have 30 books on Goodreads and 400 ratings. So that's where the 400 came from.
That sounds a little more like it.
I don't know. I thought I kind of liked the fact that he had 400 stories. That's
That's
I've got more than 400, just not published.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
And that's a story we need to touch a little later. I was going to ask you if you could expand on plot stupid.
Oh, so one of the things that bothers me a lot, and I talk about this a lot when I work with writers, I work with a lot of writers, is they'll do something like, oh, the character's suddenly afraid. Why are they afraid? Because otherwise they would jump through the door and the whole story would be over. Well, no, 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 no. If their nature is not to be afraid, they're not afraid.
There you go.
You know, we've told you that this person is a 43rd level intellect and they can't figure out a knock knock joke. I need to understand that's because of cultural context or some reason. Otherwise, they should figure out the knock knock joke. And I see it in movies all the time. You ever seen Screen Rant? Does a thing
Yes.
called pitch meeting? Okay, and pitch meeting is full of statements because it's burlesquing what actually happens in the writers' room.
Right.
They're going to run super fast. That'll be really useful. It will never happen again. Yeah. And this is
Gotcha.
what I try to avoid. This is a key to almost all of my writing, is if the character is able to figure it out, the character has the financial resources to do it, if there's some reason they can do something, some activity, and it's important to the story, then there better be a really good reason if they don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
It should never simply be, I got another 30,000 words I have to finish. It
Right.
should always be, this is what's going on.
That's
And
So
character driven. That's
oh,
yes.
yes,
character driven. Yeah, yeah.
but not just character driven, it's specifically giving the character room to tell their story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on a story right now that's due for publication very soon, and the critical conceit is that a character shows up and says, you know, you don't have the right to call yourself that.
Right.
And it creates a spiral. It's literally the experience of somebody being challenged on a fundamental thing they just accepted, that as a character they should have accepted, you know, they're fine with, but now somebody has asked them objectively, what's the value of you claiming that? And when
Fascinating.
you write authentic characters, you have those kind of ends. You have the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity to create story from very, very simple premise of somebody saying, you really think so?
Yeah.
And that can spiral things, that can create things, that can cause challenges, that can allow a whole level of insights for the reader into the character.
Let's talk if we can. There's a great segue here. Let's talk about your Cibo route trilogy, right? Cibo is a mountain man. There's
Yes.
3 books there. And one of the things that I find really amazing is that all of this takes place in a relatively small area on a mountain. Help me with the exact location of the mountain.
So
Which state is that?
Jackson Quarter is in what at that time would be Virginia. Now it would be West Virginia, and it's in the
Okay.
Appalachians.
So each of the 3 books has a different protagonist.
Yes.
So what that it does on one level is you get to tell that story, that person's story. But what it does collectively is it gives us a wider, multidimensional view
Yes.
of that community and the meaning of community and the importance of every individual in that community, which is really, it seems very much to me, the through line message of this trilogy. Could you talk to us a little bit about Cibo's Mountain Men, how it came to be, what your choices were, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty about why those 3 and how it met the goals that you had.
Right.
That's a lot of questions. I'm sorry.
I'm going to answer one of the early ones, and then I'll come back around. So blame Michael Moorcock. Yes. Michael Moorcock had this brilliant conceit in a whole series of his novels where a bunch of his characters all meet at one point. And so in, I think it's a dozen of his novels, you get the same scene, but this time it's Coram Jahardis Ray. This time it's Elric of Melnibourne. You
Right.
get each of these characters coming into the same scene that you've seen as a reader, and you get the opportunity to hear their version of it. And the thing that struck me about that is the absolute requirement for the scene to work regardless of whose eyes you see it through.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And recently this got reaffirmed. This happened after I wrote that trilogy, but it really, really reaffirmed. I was talking to a writer named Narcy Arlen, who I published Encrypted and Conspiracies Volume 1. And Marcy is a stage director by trade. And one of the things that she said to me is when she writes a fight scene, she writes out the choreography for each character to figure out how they got from this spot to this spot.
Okay.
And it's that same idea. So the core conceit in that trilogy is everybody who's in the room has their own story, is in their own direction, is going their own way. The world is bigger than just the one through line. And that's why I chose to do what I did there. Now, let me go back to the beginning, which is where this all came from. So, a guy by the name of Daniel Arthur Smith, who does Tales of the Canyons of the Damned, was introduced to me at John and Lara Frater's. It was John's birthday.
Okay.
And Daniel says to me, writers keep pitching me stories I've seen a million times. I said, I've got a story about somebody who throws their friends' dead bodies into the sun because they're asteroid miners and there's no place to bury them. He said, I want it. And that's Ship of the Dead. When I got Ship of the Dead published with him, one of the people who was across the table of contents from me was a guy by the name of Terry R. Hill.
Okay.
So Terry and I became friends. So this is where we start the story, where my friend from Texas introduced me to a guy in the Philippines who's working with a publisher in England who had offices in Pennsylvania so this New Yorker could write Westerns. And that's how I have to say that. This is the age of the internet, boys and girls. This is how connections work. Nick Whale, the publisher over at Dusty Saddle, had one requirement. Can you turn a good book in 30 to 40 days? Novella. And that was the challenge he put in front of me. And so I showed him a weird Western I'd been working on. And he said, this is great. And if you really want, I would publish this, but this is not my market. You want to get to my market, what I really need right now is Appalachian Mountain Men. I was like, is that a category? He was like, yes, it's a category. So I wrote Hiram Meager Younger, which is the first book in Cibo's Mountain Men. And because it's so wildly different than everything else I write, I did it under a pen name.
Cibo Root.
Yes, which is Barouch, Cibo Root. Yes.
There you go.
Just a slight mispronunciation. I wanted to be clear that I'm proud of it. It was not that I was hiding it under a pen name. It's
Right.
that I needed to be very clear this is just a different style, a different approach.
Right.
So I wrote the first book, and then Nick did this tremendously good kindness. He brought a bunch of his starting authors into a Zoom call, and he gave us the actual marketing information about how he markets. And afterwards, he and I were talking, and he said to me, you know, you're the only one whose eyes didn't glaze over. And I'm like, I have a business background. He's like, apparently. And so what he told me is that the primary market for Westerns is older, conservative, and female. Not what I expected. Okay. And what I wrote without knowing that was apparently in the right sweet spot. And then I gave him the next two books, The Old Prune's Nephew, which is a newcomer showing up there right after the death of a major character, so that he's showing up in a community that has just lost a load-bearing member, if you will, and he's now showing up as somebody who may not be able to contribute anything.
Right.
And this is not a community that can survive with people who can't directly contribute. It's not a matter of charity or no charity. It's literally we're living on the edge of a mountain in a place where everything's inhospitable, and it's only the active work of everybody that keeps us whole.
Can I just cut in for a quick second here? I need to cut in for a quick second. I'm being the odd man out here because I really haven't read this series. And so one of the questions that's going through my head is where I know where Appalachia is, but I don't have a sense of anything else. Can you just give our audience a little bit of an understanding of the series?
Oh, absolutely. So first of all, Appalachia is huge. The range is quite a considerable amount of America is in there. And the modern thing you have to understand about Appalachia is that this is the definition of an underserved community. These are people where they don't have cable running to their house. It's not geographically reasonable. If they don't have satellite, they don't have internet. These are people who are living in our modern world, but in many ways are being shoved backwards. And yes, there are people in Appalachia who have everything you have in the middle of New York City in terms of, modern convenience, but it's still not the norm there. So, we think of the world as a modern world. These are people who are stuck paying modern taxes, dealing with modern problems, but not participating in most of the modern world. And you can very easily code that for almost every disadvantaged ethnic, racial, religious, gender-based group. Pick a group. They are, as a community, because of geography, in that same boat, and some of them also live in many of those other categories. So when you go back to the origination of that area, a lot of the people who were moving there to avoid what was their modern. They're showing up at the time period that I'm dealing with is between the Civil War and the Revolutionary War. So the Revolutionary War is over. You've got a lot of people who are disheartened. They want to live here, but they don't see themselves as American. They didn't see themselves as British. What they'd like to see themselves as is alive, and that's their focus. So these are people who are going up into the mountains to carve out their own path. And the story is taking place a few generations down the line with this community. And as you find out in the second book, almost nobody there is from the original group because life is hard. Children don't usually survive. This is not a generational community. This is not, my grandfather and my great grandfather were on the hill. It's most of the people who founded this are dead, and we've had just enough influx of people to not collapse as a group. And so it's a group constantly on the edge of the edge. And one of the things that is my mission in doing this is to write about a group like that where the connectiveness of everybody is important and the independence of everybody is important. And their primary motivator is to not be bothered. They don't want the government counting them in a census. They do not want to be taxed. They do not want to contribute to this, that, and the other thing. They just want to be. And they're willing to work fantastically hard to do that. And they're willing to take all of the consequences of not opting in. But at the same time, they have to do what they're doing. So you're looking at a place that is not officially a town. It does not have a sheriff. It does not have a mayor. It does not have a jail. Everything is handled through social interaction. In fact, in the second book, they get their first community meeting place ever. There's a backstory about there was one before that, but almost nobody in the group has any recollection that's true. I killed off the only guy who knew about it. So the story is really about the balance between I am an independent individual, I am my own entity, I can function even in the absence of everybody else, but I still need to trade with the guy who knows how to make beer because most of the water is not healthy to drink. I still need to interact with the guy who's going downslope and trading with the little town there in the trading post because I need stuff I can't make. So I throw little lessons in there. One guy gets taught literally how to weatherproof a log cabin. So I had to learn how to weatherproof a log cabin. There's things there about lime mining and the things you can and cannot do with lime in terms of tanning hides, in terms of medical care, all sorts of things like that. So the story is a deep dive into what it takes, not this idealized, oh, we're going to live independently. And it's not the prepper fantasy. It's literally the people who are doing it. And yep.
I'm going to add in here, the thing that I would really make a point of at this juncture is that one of the things that is most impressive with the Cibo's Mountain Men trilogy is that all of that information is introduced and covered and dealt with in light doses that are organic to the story, that the information and the knowledge base builds as the characters need it, and it all supports that through line or subplot about this community really needs each other. And to be reading these in 2025 here in suburbia, in a very different America than is viewed in Cibo's Mountain Men, the morals, the simple morals of these people. Not a single one of them walks around telling speeches. They just live. And it's that organic morality that like you say, in the second book, a newcomer comes in, and not only do they give him a chance, but they give him they keep assessing and giving him what he needs. And you have a, dare I say, genius plot device where there is someone we saw in the first book who's down from up mountain, and you would think this one would be the natural fit, and this city guy would not be, and you get to play out what makes someone succeed or survive. Succeed's a weird word, but survive in this community based on what's in your heart and how much work you're willing to do.
It sounds
We're
like there's been
talking
a
about,
great deal of very successful world building within the proper structure of good pacing and good character development.
and I'm
Thank you for that. Both.
leading to a leading to a question about that, Alex, because primary activities are fishing, hunting, farming, or getting unyielding ground
A
ready
lot
to
of it is
farm.
closer to gardening than farming, but yes,
Right.
exactly. It's having
And
some
you know,
sustainability.
there's in lieu of shopping, there's going and gathering berries and stuff like that. There are some natural threats, and there's a refrain that the mountain takes. Now, all of this, if I remember correctly about you, Charles, all of this is coming out of the creativity of a New Yorker,
Yes,
right?
born and
You
bred.
didn't live in the Appalachia ever,
No,
right?
so to be clear, if you dropped a pin on the map where the hospital is that I was born in and drew a circle about 4 miles,
Yeah.
I've only ever lived a month outside of that at any given time.
And that's in Brooklyn or
Um,
Manhattan?
that's Queens.
Queens. Okay.
I've lived 3 weeks in Hong Kong. I've lived a month in San Diego. I've lived a bunch of places very, very short term.
Right.
But
But never
every place
Appalachia.
I've lived has been here.
Right.
And
So
and
the one
good.
of the great attractions to having you on the show is because just by the existence of Cibo's Mountain Men, it's a great lesson that anybody can write about anything if they put the work in. So here we are going to put Charles on the spot a little bit. What was that work like for you? What did it entail? How would you advise people to go about researching something they want to write about that is not their natural habitat?
That's three
So
questions right there.
yes. And I'm going to answer a fourth one before we get to those three.
Okay.
Excellent.
One of the interesting bits of reality testing is I spent a couple of months chatting with an author named Cindy O'Quinn.
Oh,
And
Cindy, yeah.
Cindy lives in the part of West Virginia I was writing in. I did not know her when I picked it, and has lived a sustainable life. At one point, her family lived a completely self-sustaining life where they did all their own farming and their own management, and yes, some buying and selling, but essentially the lifestyle that I'm talking about brought to the modern world. And I got some really good reality testing out of that, but it all happened after I had written this trilogy.
Wow.
Um, so
So did you pass the test, the Cindy O'Quinn test?
mostly enough that she was willing to do a small writing project with me. But yes.
Ah, fantastic.
So going back to the original question, the research was really two parts because what I need to do is understand my audience.
Right.
And I wrote the first book before I had the marketing information. And what I understood was that they're going to be between two ideas. And one idea is the absolute, as close as you can get to it, historical truth. And
Okay.
the other is Gunsmoke, Bonanza, John Wayne, Have Gun Will Travel, Maverick. Literally, all of this inundation that came to us of Westerns in movies, in books, in television, that if you're talking older people, one of the things you have to take into account is either they or their parents were very influenced when Westerns were everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Where you had spaghetti Westerns because even countries that were not part of this felt so attached to it that they were telling their own versions of the stories.
Right.
And then you start looking at things like the Kurosawa films where you get things like Yojimbo and then you get Fistful of Dollars and things like that, where there's all this connection where Westerns bring in themes from other countries because they play exactly into that.
Well, you get the Magnificent Seven based on, yeah,
Yes,
right.
exactly that. So part of what I understood up front is that I'm not researching only the truth. I'm understanding what my audience's expectation is. And back to your very early comment about I'm writing in the style that belongs there.
Mm.
I started with the idea that I want you to listen when I talk. So
Right.
I have to understand what you'll listen to. And so
Okay.
when I started doing this, yes, absolutely, I sat down and started doing research on the time period, but that was the minor part of the research. The major part was going back and watching old TV shows, going through whatever streaming services I had access to and going, oh, let's watch some Gunsmoke.
James Arness.
Let's watch some Big Valley.
Right.
Let's actually put myself in the mindset that's formative to my readers about how this works. And then I can go in and do things like how lime works, which is not part of any of that. How you actually insulate a building, which things are a bad idea that sound like a good idea for insulating a building. All of those kind of things. And then I start drawing on everything. So I'm the kind of person who is in every research rabbit hole at the same time.
Right.
And
So
that meant that a lot of the research was already done before I did this, because when I considered writing Novely Mondi, which is the weird Western I've yet to finish or publish, I started looking at, okay, so what's going on in that time period? What's considered normal? Because you can't tell, in that case, a supernatural story unless you understand the baseline.
right.
So, if you're talking about certain periods of time in the United States, you have to understand things like death photography was normal. Posing your dead relatives and
Yeah.
taking pictures of them as if they were alive was not weird or supernatural or marginal. It just was.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of that weirdness when you go back into the past. There was a period of time when it was considered perfectly normal for you to photograph your underage children naked and send pictures around to relatives. Okay? This is not anything we would ever justify as normal now, and there's lots of reasons it shouldn't have been normal then.
Right.
But that's the lens of normal for there. There was a time when, if you looked at this country, there were certain cultural norms that in a generation have disappeared.
Okay.
And when you're talking about living in this time right now, the number of things that were true 20 years ago that people happily walk around pretending were never true, things that were true 50 years ago, people walk around like that never happened. It takes so little time for people to lose their history, to lose their sense of what normal is and replace it with a whole different normal, to the point where we realize normal is not a usable word except for research and context. It's not a way to live, it's a way to understand how people lived in the past.
So let me push a little further on the research. You started doing some of the research for the Weird Western. That
Yep,
takes care of a portion at least of the bulk of the research. But you did talk about a lot of research, watching a lot of different shows,
yep.
doing some deep diving on Lyme, etc. So how much of that was done before you got the first 30 to 40 day deadline?
Oh, so a lot of it.
Okay.
I'm not a prepper survivalist, but I find them fascinating. Once again, I write the other. I write people I don't fully understand. So I've watched videos that these people put out about how to do that.
Right.
But when I'm writing people trying to subsist and survive, I'm looking at that. I've read a lot of zombie apocalypse. And when society breaks down and stops working, you fall back on things like, do you know how to make a coal stove work? Do you understand how to iron clothing without electricity if ironing is useful to you? Do you know how to do A and B and C that we do right now? Because there's a great line, I think it's from the movie Time After Time. It's the
Mm.
problem is we keep doing the same damn things.
Right.
And so what it comes down to is everything we do now, we did then in some version. So maybe we weren't watching streaming services, but we cared about hearing stories.
Yes.
So what does a storyteller look like in Appalachia in the 1835 period?
Okay.
I just did something. I just did a piece, a presentation on Orson Welles' War of the Worlds. And in order for the audience that was listening to me, I
Yeah.
wanted them to have a sense of the 1930s and
Yes.
why that particular radio show could do what it did, could suddenly inspire people to panic and run and believe that we'd been invaded. And
Yep.
basically, part of what I did was let them understand how the radio was the web in those days.
Yes.
And the moment I made that connection, so how you're sitting there with your phone looking at YouTube and scrolling like crazy, everyone turned on the radio for their immediate knowledge, their immediate news. They trusted the news. And subsequently, you're hearing X happening in a state that you really know
Hmm.
about at a time that, oh, it is that time of the night, and blah,
Right.
blah, blah. If it's done just right, break the formula a little bit, and suddenly hundreds of people are
Yep.
believing we're being invaded by Martians. So
Orson
again, I just
Welles
did,
doing his time era's version of deep fake.
yeah, exactly. And again, even if you listen to, and I don't want to sidetrack this, but I'm just saying, if you listen to the episode, at the very, very beginning of the episode, he announces it's the beginning of the episode. This is a new show. This is,
Right. But
you know,
anyone who did not catch the first 5 minutes, yes,
well, there's
exactly.
that. But the other thing too is if you caught the first couple of minutes, fine. But what people were used to was commercial breaks.
Right.
And there was, for 20 minutes, there was no commercial breaks. There was only the interruption of the newscasters. So
Yep.
again, you broke the norm, you broke the formula, and suddenly they're like, well, wait a minute. And
Right.
that's all you needed. And then people were
Right.
rolling. So I totally get what you're saying
Yeah.
about establishing that kind
Yep.
of
All
feeling.
right, so let's zoom in a little more. Okay, so you did that research beforehand, but then the clock starts ticking
Yep.
and you have your first assignment. Once you start writing, how many times, or can you give us an example at least of as you're writing, oh, I don't know enough about that. And then what did you do under the time constraints?
Part of that is because of the time constraints. I chose very carefully who I crafted as a character. I kept them in my wheelhouse. I kept them to things that I largely knew. So yes, I was researching a fact here or there. I had a friend very helpfully point out to me that West Virginia was still part of Virginia at the time, little things that I actually missed. And I will not tell you about the time in another series where I actually put the Atlantic Ocean in the wrong place. I absolutely will not tell that story because that couldn't possibly have happened. Yes, deep research, but you can still do 2 + 2 = 5, which is a problem.
Sure.
I got called out because I slipped time period and said something about the Civil War before it happened in one book, but I fortunately got caught because I have a writing group, because I have beta readers, because I have other people who look at my stuff, including my soon to be 97-year-old mother, who won't read my
Bless her.
science fiction, will not read my horror, but
Right,
reads my westerns
right.
and loves
And
the
full
solid writing
disclosure,
things she'll read. Yep,
full disclosure, just in the honesty there, I'm lucky enough to be in Charles's writing group, and I find it very useful.
happy to have you.
I think I
Yep,
mention it almost every week in the newsletter. So yes. All right. So another thing, another element that is, God, it was just so enjoyable to read and experience is the dialect is fantastic and not at all Queens. No one sounds like Peter Parker.
Oh, oh.
So how did we do this? And how many times did you rewrite it to get that sound so well? How'd you research how to rewrite? What did you do?
So no rewrites for getting the dialogue right. I will tell you my favorite story about getting the dialogue right. I'm driving to my board game group and
Hmm.
I'm hollering at the voice assistant on my phone to let the person I'm picking up know that I'm on my way, and it does not understand me, and I realized that I had shifted over into the dialect. The reason I didn't get it wrong is I was talking like them. I
Okay.
had unconsciously, this became my inner voice, this became my outer voice. I was talking like my characters. And when you can completely shift over to that, then it ain't hard at all to understand what they were trying to do here, because, it is, but it ain't. And once you get there, they're absolutely there. And I have to tell you that people who have the actual accent have made so much fun of my accent, but I'm getting the word choices right for the characters I'm writing.
Okay, so the people who are from that region make fun of you, but
well, the accent doesn't work, but the word choices do.
word
Yeah.
choice does.
Yeah.
One of my favorite is he doesn't have the intellect to fill an acorn.
Yeah,
Read that.
and once again, if you think about it, it's back to that statement, we still do the same things. We had ways of, we have ways of putting people down now. We have ways of commenting on people right now.
Right.
And we had ways then. It's not new for somebody to issue a negative opinion referencing things that are in their milieu, that are in their world. And so that's what I'm doing there.
And go ahead.
I was going to say, but the important thing in all this, when you're talking about how to get the voice right, is I grew up, like I said, in my little corner, but I've traveled a lot of places. And living in Flushing right now, I'm in the most ethnically diverse place on the planet, literally. You can walk 2 blocks in any direction and have multiple choices of a type of cuisine.
Sure.
So it's like, let's go this way. There's 4 shabu shabu places. Let's go over here. There's 8 taco places. Let's go over here. There's 3 different choices of Indian food. How many dozen places would you like to get sushi? And even down to much more exotic foods. So I'm always hearing lots of people.
It's about the
And I'm
ear.
hearing those differences. And while I don't speak multiple languages, I do get the benefit that people who speak multiple languages get of being able to say, oh, that's not common. It's just common to me as an English speaker.
Right.
That over there is really common. I hear that particular phoneme from 12 different languages. And things like that make it much easier for you to take on. And like I said, my accent does not match, but I understand where the word choices are coming from.
So one of the takeaways here is just keep your eyes and ears open for you can learn everywhere all the time.
And
one of the last
You're fortunate enough to live in an area that's diverse. Yeah.
But we also have, I mean, one of the things I'm going to send Charles after this is I don't know if you have Instagram, Charles, but it's Instagram or YouTube. There's a young lady from Appalachia. She does Appalachian word of the day, and then other just little personality pieces, and she's charming and always just a little human. And I wound up following her because, again, very different than the stuff I usually see, but you couldn't not like her. Yeah. And that brings me to the last question about the Cibo Mountain stuff, although I could probably go for 4 more hours because it is such a rich thing. Ladies and gentlemen, you can get them on Amazon. Cibo's Mountain Men. It's fantastic. I'm going to talk about something in the second book where you have the city slicker up there. And damn, I forget her name, but there's young Edith?
Ida.
Vita. Yeah, Vita. She's a young lady, not too much out of his age range, and she's tough. She's uncompromising. She doesn't have she doesn't approve of a lot of the stuff he does wrong, including you don't talk right. You got to learn to talk right. And all of that we slowly see is actually romance. And it was such a beautiful aspect of the story. And one of the things that is so rewarding about these stories is that they keep giving you these gifts where you see the innate kindness of those trying to survive. And so many people forget because they have the luxury of being annoyed by things. These people don't. They have to survive. And she doesn't have time to wait for or even have a vocabulary for any kind of courting process. She thinks he would make a good match. And
she's only got one other choice, but yes.
She does. Yeah, she only has one other choice who you would think would be the shoo-in.
Yeah.
But it's actions and how he conducts himself that negates that, and how this person who is the least likely to succeed, but his actions and his determination is what, again, it's not who you are, it's how you are. And it was really beautiful, great stuff. But I want to segue because you're not just a Cibo Mountain Man writer. I was honored to have you in the latest Soul Scream anthology, Fear and
Thank you
Loathing.
for the invite.
I was the lucky one, so thank you. And you wrote a story called Final Advice.
Yes.
And every story has an interview, and the headline for the interview with you was Charles Barouch flies far into the future, fueled by the present. And your story, this was supposed to be horror tales for a changed world, and your story fit perfectly, and it was the furthest into the future of all of the stories. Let's talk about the choices you made for this story. Was it something that existed? Was it something that you just thought this might fit?
So let me just do one last thing on the Cibo thing.
Yes, please.
Cibo's not done.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
My publisher asked me to do a rebrand, so there's a different pen name. But
okay.
The Greek's little brother, the Turk, comes down the mountain, and David Barouch has 2 books, soon to be 3 books.
That's right.
Continuing the storyline there. So you get to see one of these people from upslope coming downslope into a town that's trying to do the exact opposite. They're trying to fit in. They're trying to formalize. They're trying to become part of this America that's being built.
And that's where we meet a certain sheriff, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So, and now I'll leave Theo Starr off of that, and I'll come back around to your question.
So we have 3 Cibo Mountains men, and so far we have 2 Theo Starr stories,
and the third one's being finished right now. And then after that, there'll be a trilogy bringing Theo into the future, his future, our past, in 1865, which is going to be a spin-off both from what I've done up until this point, and it's going to have a character contributed by Robert Hanlon, who's one of the top names in Westerns right now. Something that my publisher was able to negotiate for me. So after the 3rd book in the Theo Starr series, you'll see Theo as an older mentor in the future to 2 young men who refer to themselves as the Timberwolves.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, you have lots to read from here. Cibo Root, David Barouch, all from Charles Barouch.
And now back around to your question.
Now into the future. What was the deal behind that story?
When Google Plus was still a thing, I'm talking to this woman who worked for a small press called Hermit Tree Press, and she told me the most disturbing story about a Google Plus post. She said she had posted a picture and was talking about something that had happened to her, the picture represented, and somebody looked at it and said, "Oh my God, you've lost so much weight. Whatever it is you did, tell me. I will do whatever you tell me to do." And this horrified her. It's like, I'm a stranger to this person. I'm just somebody they ran into on the internet, and based on 2 pictures, a picture that showed me heavier and this picture, they have decided to give up all their free will to me. And, granted, it might have been hyperbole when they said, "I'll do whatever you say," but that's how it struck her. And when she told me this story, she was soliciting stories for an anthology called Nova Pulp. And I had done about 50% of the editing for the first Nova Pulp for them. They had a bunch of people editing. They split editing the way they split writing. So there were multiple writers, multiple editors, but a lot of people backed out, and I did half the edits. So when they were doing the second one, and she said this, I said, "You inspired it. I'm going to write it." And I wrote the original version of Final Advice, which was literally, you have to give advice to somebody you will never meet. It's somebody in the past trying to leave a time capsule for the future with certain knowledge. What is it you need to hear from me based on what I know about now? I have to guess what your world's going to be like. And fortunately, he's paranoid enough and he's negative enough to actually get it pretty much right. Now, I have to thank you, Chris, because the ending in the version that's in Soul Scream is much stronger, and I blame you completely for that. I got some very good developmental notes from you that left the story almost completely intact, but made it a much stronger story. And I'm very proud of what I did then, but I'm prouder of what I did this time, and I do credit you for the information and the inspiration that made it a stronger, tighter story.
Well, thank you. That's a huge compliment, and I will be walking around kind of feeling good for a whole hour or
It's like
so.
Alex
You'll be
picked really
wiggling
well in
this
a
this
partner
evening
game.
now. Yes.
Yeah, that is fantastic. I thank you. But I mean, that's kind of the process when you do one of these things. You're just trying to make it as great as possible. Not everybody, not everybody takes feedback well. As one person, I really wanted to publish this story, but I had it needed this, and this, and the guy just took this story and
Yep.
gone. And it was sad because I thought that would have been a good fit. You try your best, and it's a good takeaway for everybody that, when an editor says something, then unless you can tell when there's that ridiculous editor who's just snide, you're never going to get to the level of substance of a story. But if you get the substance of a story, it's because they want to publish it and work with it. One of the great things in the writing group is when you point out this, I can't get past this point. I need it to be this, not how to write the story, but I need it to be bigger. I need it to be more specific. I remember we went to the first 3 words of the chapter and then dropped 2 lines and then continued it, and it was so much better. Even something like that, it's sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees, and that's one of the reasons why these kind of entities are so valuable. So why that far in the future for that story? Why sci-fi for that story?
I wanted literally this concept of distance because the key thing in her story, when she told me the actual event, was 2 people who've never met, who have no real connection, and one of them is being tasked with giving absolute truth to the other person. And so time became my alternative to it being a web post. It became
Yeah.
another way to create that concept of distance between the two.
And it helped to create a lot of tension, which was really cool.
And background, by the way, to what you were saying, when I teach writing, one of the things that I teach is what I call the artist versus the craftsman. The
Explain,
artist
please.
creates from the depth of their soul, which means criticizing their work is criticizing them. With a craftsman, you can say, it's a lovely table, but it slants 45 degrees and the drinks keep falling off and my carpet's wet. Because you have objective measures, right?
Right.
45 degrees is not an opinion. It's an
Right.
objective measure. Its job is to be a table, is an objective measure. And
Right now
to
it's a
my
ski slope.
mind, right, to my mind, the goal is to always be both artist and craftsman.
Right.
But when you're getting critique, you must be as much of the craftsman as you can be. You
Yeah,
must
that's
be
great
open to the
advice.
idea that there are objective measures, that some things are opinions. Some things are an opinion you're going to get from so many people. It's functionally objective in the place where you're trying to publish.
Yeah.
But at the
It
same time, some of it is truly objective. It's like you just used the same word 8 times in a sentence. It's boring.
yeah.
Okay.
And it throws you out of the story. That's
Oh,
always
yeah.
the thing. You can't let things exist if they're going to throw a
And
reader
I
out
got
of the
to
story.
go back to something Alex said before when you're talking about breaking the rules. Okay. I am a huge fan of only ever breaking the rules intentionally. Only to purpose, only to import. And I know that's exactly where you were going with that, but I just wanted the actual word said there because it's really the point you were making, and I love it and I want to underline it. When I break a rule, it's always to a purpose. If I break a sentence into 4 different sentences by putting a period after each word, it's because I want you to see something there by doing that. When
And
I
in order
break
to break
something,
it, you have to
yep,
know the rule. Yeah.
and you have to respect it every other place, otherwise the break doesn't look like a
There you
break.
go.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are of a kind on this.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah. We
right
have to
there.
watch because those kind of things can become like crack. I went through an ellipsis period. Right. There was just a lot of ellipses and ellipsi, I guess, if there's plural. And I really had to go through a 12-step program to get rid of that stuff because,
Every now and then
you
he
think
still
you do it
Joneses a
once.
little, right?
Yeah.
Or exclamation points,
Oh, that was mine.
unless you're Stan Lee
That was mine
in
for a while.
Fantastic Four and it's kind of a
Yeah.
wink.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can become like crack as well. So you have to be very careful about the rules.
I've heard there are writers that will even budget their exclamation points. They will pick a number for that story and they will just keep track. And if they exceed it, they have to take it away from somewhere if they want to add it somewhere else.
Got
Right.
you.
Yeah.
We're
In
gonna have
fiction, I
to.
allow myself 3 a decade.
We're gonna have to sort of round this off now. So I know, Chris, you probably have at least one more question, but I also want to make sure that we have a chance for our guest to
Right.
share whatever thought he would like to
Well,
as a
well, we
parting
didn't
gift.
talk about crime and we didn't talk about his horror. There's plenty of that. We may have to bring Charles back for another time.
Oh,
I
darn. Gee, I guess
It's
we'll
just,
have to
it
do
will
that.
be very painful, I know. But maybe the question to ask is, what haven't we asked? What advice haven't we gotten out of you that you think would be valuable for people to
Oh,
hear?
so the two best pieces of advice I ever got about writing were not about writing. The
All
first one
right.
was I was in a ceramics class, and the teacher, Dr. Hofstetter, said, if you can't work 10 pounds of clay, work 20 and then go back to 10. The other one was I had a teacher,
Right.
Professor Camras, and what Professor Camras said to me is, oh, I always have 20 art projects going at any given time because if I come up with an idea, I want to put it in the project it belongs in, not wedge it into the only thing I'm working on.
That's great.
So I will give you both of those, and I will also say permission to suck and permission to quit. A lot of my
Commissioner,
writing is going back to a pile of stuff I never finished and going, story sucks, character's great, let's grab her, put her somewhere else. You know, the
right.
story's great if only it was told from somebody's interesting perspective. Let's shift it over to Bob instead of Sue. And that's a lot of my writing is I keep going back to the well of all these failures and unfailing them. But you can't do that unless you give yourself permission to fail and permission to suck and permission to write crap on the page. My favorite friend is TBD. I will get to a point where I'm stuck on something, I'll write TBD, fight scene goes here, and keep writing. I'm not obligated to ever finish the piece, even if it's on deadline, I'll go write something else if I have to. But
Okay.
never get trapped in this, I've been working on this, it has to finish. If it's not good, it should be put aside. And maybe one day you can make it good or you can mine something out of it. Or I've got two novels that will never come out of the trunk.
Right.
You know?
But I mean, going back to the suck part, because on this show, I often say, let it suck. The idea being get through the first draft. That's meant to help those who, when the first time they come up against some difficulty, they say, well, the story I really want to tell is this other story about the invasion of, zombie umbrellas or something.
Yeah.
And they tell that story until they hit a difficulty. And then it's the ostriches from the other episode,
Yeah.
and they never get anything done.
Well, they get stuck with what I call perfection paralysis. It's not perfect.
Right.
It's not perfect. What are you talking about? Perfect.
Let it suck. Get to the end.
Yep.
Yes,
Yeah. But
exactly.
it's a combination somewhere between what Charles is saying and what, I espouse and what Alex says. You have to be aware enough, self-aware enough that you know when you're running away
Yep.
and you know when you're saying, no, I need this to just gestate for a while.
Hmm.
And
I'm going to put
maybe
this
those
in
are
the
two
root
different
cellar and
books.
let it grow.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
Charles, what was that?
And maybe they're two different books. Put the ostriches
Yes.
over here, put the umbrellas over there, and have
Yeah.
two stories.
Yeah, and that's fine.
Yep.
Zombies for
Uh,
everybody.
Yep.
I like what something you just said, Charles, is now going to sort of, I have this image in my head now. I may at some point do a sketch of it. So a writer's waiting room. It's like you see, it's like going back there and pulling something out. There's a lot of old characters
Yep.
and plots sitting around going, you think you'll ever get to us today? Yeah. I just have this image in my head now.
Yeah.
and it could be something having let it gestate, a completely different approach comes to you that makes it work.
Yeah.
I think it was last night, I'm watching TV with Glorious, and there was a commercial featuring Frankenstein, full outfit and all that stuff, and he was doing house stuff, like he was either doing laundry or ironing his shirt or whatever,
Yep.
and he's watching some YouTube and they're doing their hair and he watches and then he cuts his bangs, so he's in it and all this different stuff. And it ends up he's got his white shirt on, he's got suspenders, he's got the bangs, and he's at a restaurant with a date, a guy.
Hmm.
And he leans over and says, Nothing about the bangs." And you realize he has a sexual orientation, which Frankenstein never had. And it's not telegraphed at all. It's just organically, and it came across as such a fresh take. And I forget even what they were selling because I was so taken with the character. I have to wait till I see the commercial again to find out what they were selling.
Well, that explains why he and Elsa Lancaster didn't work out. Now I get it.
Well, as the retail
everyone falls for a well put together man. So,
yeah, I thought the hair thing was a problem, but no, that's not it. Okay.
Yeah, now that you have he has the new bangs.
Yeah,
but I just thought, wow, that was amazing. There's a lot of really amazing commercials that are going on. They're doing those little things now. It was just an aside. It had nothing to do
with anything, but it was fun.
Yeah,
it was fun.
Yeah, there you go.
So Charles, we will have you back. We will. That's a given. Chris, we'll talk about how soon, how quickly, because you do want to talk about the mysteries. I love mysteries, and we want to talk about the horror, which Chris loves horror.
And again, your wealth of information and a pleasure to talk to, and I really appreciate it. I do have to apologize. We did have a little difficulty lining up the recording here. Partially that was my fault, not partially, wholly, because it's very hard for Alex to send the link to you if I never give him your email address. So it was my fault, and I apologize. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you're shocked. You're saying, wait, Chris Ryan is not perfect? Flawed? Yeah. He is not. How did this happen?
Dude, the second episode of Horror Words podcast literally has 2 spots that just say technical difficulties. And the only reason the second episode worked is because Heidi Gygax Garland the next day got up, put the same clothing back on, and re-recorded a section we lost so that we could have it back.
It's fantastic.
There you go.
She's a
Chris,
trooper.
No, I was just going to say, Chris, as always, great. Charles, once again, thank you so much for coming. Really, really appreciate it. Chris, what do you want the world to do now that we've met
Well,
Charles?
I mean, having the benefit and the richness of the wisdom of Charles Barouch, the least you can do is hit like and subscribe and tell your friends, share this episode with all those people who could benefit from this. Go out and check out some of his writing. Charles Barouch, Cibo Root, David Barouch. There's a lot of Charles out there. Go and get it. If you go to Goodreads, they'll tell you there's 30 books and 400 likes. That's right, you could be the 401st like. Get out there.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming,
Thank you, Charles. Thank you really much. Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. Adios, Chris.
Thanks.